What would you say is the hardest thing to grow on your homestead?
Well, gosh, that's an interesting question. Some of the hardest things to grow. Now, we're kind of tucked away in the woods. So we are limited in the amount of space that we have that's full sun for growing. And a lot of crops that we want to grow and seeds that are popular for folks to purchase are crops that require full sun. So we would think of things, of course, like tomatoes and peppers and eggplants, corn, melon, squash, cucumbers, those types of things. They require a lot of sun. And some of those crops also take up a lot of space. So one of the greatest challenges that we have is kind of deciding how much of this full sun space do we want to dedicate to crop A, and how much space are we going to have left over for crop B? And sometimes we have to make some cuts. So in recent years, we've actually stopped completely growing corn. We don't grow corn anymore because it takes up a significant amount of space, and it just wasn't adding up for us to keep corn in the rotation because I found that I could produce a lot more in that same space if I chose other crops. So full sun crops are definitely the greatest challenge that we have here just because we have a limited amount of space for that. Whereas things that are partial sun or shade, like a lot of brassicas and lettuces and mustards and kales, that sort of thing. I mean, I got endless space for that. So those are very easy and we grow a lot of that. We've really in recent years started to lean into what can we do with what we have instead of how can we change the situation to make it easier to do the things we want, if that makes sense. Instead of trying to bend Mother Nature to my will, I've decided that it's easier to actually work with Mother Nature. And at the end, it's more productive, it's less work, and everybody's happier, it seems like.
Now, on the flip side, and you might have just mentioned it there, what are the easiest things to grow on your homestead? I know you just mentioned like kale as an example. Is that something that's very easy to grow?
Very easy to grow. In the last few years, I've really gotten into Asian greens. We do a lot of work with a company called Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds. I help with their catalog. We developed over the years a very nice relationship. And Jer Gettle, the owner of the company, is really into Asian greens. That's one of his personal preferences he really gets excited about. So, in turn, the catalog offers a wide variety of different types of greens from Asia. And I've started to grow those, and they perform very well for us here. They seem to really love our little microclimate. So they're very easy for us. They're incredibly nutritious. There's a ton of diversity. There's so many different things to choose from to grow. That's so much fun. So that's something that really is easy to grow here. It's good for us, and we all seem to really enjoy it. And at the end of the day, Chris, it's all about what you enjoy, right? I think that's one of the most important lessons that we can learn from the garden. We learn a lot of lessons from the garden, of course, patience probably being number one. How to accept defeat would be number two. But learning how to have fun and to go with the things that are fun in life. Life at the end of the day is really about pleasure. What do you got, 60, 70, 80 years if you're lucky? We should spend most of that doing something that we enjoy.
Yeah, amen to that. Um, you mentioned corn as something that you used to grow and you don't. Is that when you make those types of decisions? Is that something that's easy to bring back if you ever, someday you decide, hey, we want to grow corn again? Is that easy to re-implement into your homestead?
Well, I mean, physically, yes, it would be a very easy thing to implement. I just have to make that decision and plant those seeds. Really, where the difficulty lies in that sort of decision is convincing everyone here that we want to do it, I guess. For leading up to when we decided to stop growing corn, my wife was a proponent of stopping the corn years before we actually did it because she already saw the writing on the wall that it wasn't making sense for us to do. And I stubbornly held on to it for a couple of more years, trying to make it work for us economically. And at the end of the day, believe it or not, like always, she was right. And so I think if I was going to say, oh, I want to grow corn again, I'm going to have a really nice PowerPoint to present to her to really convince her that it's the right way to go. And that would be the difficulty. Physically, it's just planting seeds, which I mean, people have been planting corn for, I mean, practically 10,000 years at this point. So it's something everybody could do. But, you know, you know how it is.
Yeah. with with what you grow, does everything follow a certain schedule? Are there some things that you grow at only this time of year and then other things you have to grow at like a completely like different month or part of the year?
Sure. So some of the crops that we grow are warm weather crops. And I rattled off the list. I'll do it again. So things like tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers, squash, melons, those types of things. They're not frost tolerant at all. So they're warm weather crops. So they can only be grown really during the summer. That's when they're going to thrive. But a lot of our cool weather crops, which happen to be shade loving crops as well. So those are the ones we do a lot of now. Things like lettuce and spinach and broccoli and kale. They prefer to grow in the spring and then again in the fall. They like that cool weather. They can't handle the heat of summer. So we'll do two separate plantings and harvestings of those crops. Again, one in the spring and one in the fall. And we also grow quite a bit of garlic here. And garlic is something that we plant in the fall that stays in over winter. And then the following summer is when we harvest it. So that's like a completely different schedule than everything else. But it's kind of nice because at the end of the year, when everything's pretty much wrapping it up, we still got something we can go out and plant. And that's kind of fun.